Okay, welcome everyone. We're recording this as people are coming in. If they're still coming in, they can catch these intros on the recording. Please put your name and organization, if you're able, in the chat. And we have this Zoom is sponsored by several Howard County groups, Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. Well, that's broader. The OMI Green Teams, Howard County Climate Action, and then some larger groups, Interfaith, well, as I said, Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, who's providing our speaker, Doug Siglin. And we also have, we'll have Joel Novi from Interfaith Power and Light here. And we also work with the Howard County Sunrise students and other students that are here. We also welcome those, a couple that have signed up from other counties who are joining us to learn more about electrification. And we have a full program. We're going to start with Bonnie Sorak, who will say a few words about Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, one of the sponsors of this series, as I said. And then Wendy Hall will say something about the OMI Green Team and the upcoming event that we are co-sponsoring on on Saturday, August 27th. After that, Neil Gorturi, a student, a rising sophomore from River Hill, and already sort of a climate star, will introduce himself. He's been working on this issue along with Doug. And then after he introduces himself, I will introduce our speaker, Doug Siglin. So we will start it off with Bonnie Sorak.
Thanks so much, Ruth Alice. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. It's my pleasure to be here. So just really briefly about Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. We're a nonprofit organization that works to engage congregations in being good caretakers of our shared watershed. We envision a time when faith communities across the Chesapeake honor, care for, and protect the watershed we share, so all of our communities and future generations may thrive. So tonight, I just want to welcome you and let you know that anywhere you are in the watershed, we are interested in working with you. We have an upcoming Faithful Green Leaders training to help train green teams at congregations. That will be in October. And I'll just leave it at that and say that I'm thrilled to pass it over to Wendy Hall, who I am thrilled to call a friend and co-member at Columbia Jewish Congregation, and honored to serve on the Oakland Mills Interfaith Green Team with her. And so I'll pass it off to Wendy, and thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. That was a very warm welcome. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy Hall. I am a member of the Columbia Jewish Congregation and have the honor of leading its Green Team, and also being a member of the Oakland Mills Interfaith Center Green Team. And for those who don't know, the Columbia Jewish Congregation and 5 other congregations are all members of the Interfaith Center. So we share that space, and so when we, even as individual green teams, want to do anything to improve the space from a sustainability perspective, we need to work together with the other congregations. And so we formed the Oakland Mills Interfaith Green Team, so representing all the different congregations. And this spring, we've really blossomed, I think, as a group, and we have applied for 4 different grants and received all 4 of them, which is wonderful and also a little bit daunting because, of course, now we're doing the work. So one of those grants is the PREC grant, which is an acronym, Plastic Reduction and something or other. Bonnie, I'm sure, knows it all. And that is paid for through Howard County government with the plastic bag tax that we pay when we choose to get plastic bags from stores. And that grant is allowing us to do various public outreach and educational events in terms of plastic reduction, but in all kinds of things, including, in this case, electrification. So we are going to be having an event that Ruth Alice mentioned earlier on August 27th in the evening outside of the Oakland Mills Interfaith Center, starting at 6:30 p.m., going until 8:30 or so. We'll be having various organizations, including CCAN, including HOCO Climate Action and Electrify Howard, including IPC, Bonnie's group, including Interfaith Power and Light, the Howard County Watershed Stewards Academy. Several groups will be there talking and providing information, and we'll also have several speakers, including tonight's speaker, Doug Siglin, is going to be there as well, talking especially about electrification issues. We'll even have electric vehicles on site that people can take a look at together with their owners. We want to make sure that if you haven't registered yet, that you please do so. It's going to be a lot of fun. There will be environmental films geared towards children, free popcorn, lots of kid-friendly activities. And so we really encourage you to register and come. And the registration links have been made available together with the links for this event and the remaining webinar in September. So we encourage you to join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I think we'll also learn something. So without further ado, thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And I would be amiss if I didn't say that, yes, HOCO Climate Action is another co-sponsor, and we have several of our leaders here, Liz and Sherry, and several volunteers.
And Betsy.
And Betsy, and now I'll pass it over to Neil Gotiri, who's going to introduce himself.
Right, thank you, Ruth. Hi, everyone. My name is Neil. As you heard, I'm a rising sophomore at River Hill High School, and I've been working with Doug and CCAN probably like right at the start of summer, right before school ended, about this electrification work. We've done some good work so far. I presented at the Conservancy. You started to try to get the round running with educating people about like what electrification is, what heat pumps are, how does it compare to the traditional systems, and like what are the advantages of switching. Yeah, that's about it. I'll pass it over to Doug.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say, I think Liz is going to put Doug's full bio in the chat, and we will send all these links and more information in a follow-up email too. So if you can't copy the chat, we'll provide that all. But I won't read the full bio. I just want to say that I met him recently. He's been working with CCAN and other partner groups in DC that recently, where they recently passed a bill about electrifying new buildings. And he lives in Howard County and wants to work with us in our campaign here. So pass it over to you, Doug.
Super, thank you, everybody. So good evening, and thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure for me to be here as a Howard County resident. It wasn't clear to me sort of who the audience is and how much you know. Some of you have heard me already. Some of you probably know as much as I do here. It's going to be a bit of a long presentation. I'm going to try to rip through it quickly, but there's a lot of information that I've learned just preparing for this presentation. So hopefully you all will learn something too. So I'm calling the presentation, I assume you can all see that. I'm calling the presentation Doing Our Part for the Future and Electrifying Homes and Buildings to Save the Planet, Your Money, and Your Health. And let me see if I can get to the next slide. So it's easy to say this is really the existential issue of our time. And I didn't want to dwell on this too much, but most people who are on this call tonight know that climate's going to get a lot worse. It's going to have a lot of implications, and it's an issue that we really have to deal with. The last 7 years have been the hottest in Earth's history measured, at least since we've been measuring temperature. We're seeing droughts, storms, other indicators, and what's probably scariest about this is that this year in 2022, atmospheric concentrations are still rising. They're not going down yet, as is the total amount that we emit every year. So, at this point, with all the concern about climate change, we haven't reversed at all yet. Just wanted to throw in this quote from the UN Secretary General. He made this in Glasgow last year, a 45% cut by 2030 compared to 2010 levels is what Secretary General and the IPCC say is necessary, a 45% cut. So beginning to focus in on Maryland, this language is now our law, that the state shall achieve net zero statewide greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. So we have a long way to go in just 23 years. If you look at the sources of carbon dioxide emissions in Maryland, the preponderance still is from petroleum, the petroleum products. But a pretty good wedge is methane gas, what the industry calls natural gas. About 29% of our overall CO2 emissions are methane gas. And if you begin to break that down further, the residential and commercial building sector produces about 9 million metric tons of greenhouse gases that we have to get rid of completely by 2045 if we're going to meet that goal. And if you look at the broken apart pie chart there, you can see that the orange wedge is the commercial sector, and the kind of pink wedge is the residential sector. That's where more than half of the methane gas emissions in the state are coming from. The other big wedge, the 37, is gas-fired power plants supplying electricity to the grid. But we need to really focus on that 55% that's in the residential and commercial sector, and that's what we're doing tonight. So in 2020, Maryland had well over 1 million residential users and about 80,000 commercial users of methane gas for heat, water heat, and cooking. And you all know, or most of you know, that with methane, some leaks into your home, even when your appliances are off, and the rest, the burns, to produce CO2. And I just want to go back to these numbers for a moment because they're really stunning. We somehow, in the next 23 years, we have to get over 1 million residential users off gas and almost 80,000 commercial users. It's going to be one heck of a task. Within the home, this is sort of how the pie chart looks, that about 70% of the methane gas use within our homes on average is for space heating, and about another 26 for water heating. We're all interested in induction stoves and in cooking, but really it's a pretty small wedge, as is clothes drying, and those are fortunate enough to have pools, hot tubs. But together, about 70% space heating and about 26% water heating. So it becomes clear what we have to do to get those 1.1 million customers off gas. I thought it would be interesting to just sort of run my own numbers. This is new in this presentation tonight. We live in an old farmhouse in western Howard County, nicely remodeled. Doesn't feel old anymore. And we don't have methane gas service because we're in the rural area, so we have delivered propane. And we have done about everything that we can in our house to reduce our energy use. We've had an audit, we bought new windows, we've insulated the attic, we don't have a basement, we install film on some of our windows. And so I ran the numbers, and since March of 2021, we've burned a little bit over 1,000 gallons of propane, and that's the equivalent of 6 tons of carbon dioxide just from my house. And as I note there, it's the equivalent of driving almost 15,000 miles in a typical gas passenger car. That's just my little house, 6 tons. And for those of you wondering why I'm still burning propane, I'm working on it. We're in the process of getting out. We literally can't reach zero emissions unless we switch out all these gas appliances.
Actually, this is partly about your heating system.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they use gas heating, and they're saying they can't get to zero emissions because so many people have gas heat, and that creates so many carbon dioxide emissions.
Yes, exactly. That's absolutely true. I plead guilty, and I'm responsible for 6 tons.
Shouldn't your mom?
Yes, should we have like some tea for you?
What? Because it was 6 to 7, right?
Yeah, the chicken left over was going to go.
Go down
So,
the rabbit hole, people.
What can we do? So the first part of this is we're just going to talk about stopping emissions from the house. So I must admit that until about a year ago, I really never thought very much about where my heat and my water heat and my cooking came from. And I think the first step is this for all of us to realize that if we have these kind of appliances, we're culpable. Maybe not for 6 tons, but for quite a bit. Some people, when I've given versions of this presentation before, have said, well, wait a minute. So electricity isn't necessarily better because we use coal generating plants and oil generating plants. But in fact, that's not true. That the electrification is going to be much better. It's much better this year in 2022, and it's certainly going to be better over time. In 2022, it is the law. The RPS says that all retail electricity providers must have at least 33.1% of their electricity generated by renewable sources. And that percentage rises each of the next several years till 2030. So from the outset, if my house was electrified, at least 33%, I'd be emitting at least 33% less greenhouse gas emissions because of the RPS law. But beyond that, the rest of the generation, the baseline generation for Maryland, is such that about 42% of our base generation doesn't produce GHGs. So a small part of that is wind and solar, but and a small part is hydro. Large part of it is nuclear, but in our base electricity, 42% does not produce any GHGs. And as that, as we move forward through the next several years, particularly with the new federal production tax credits, the renewable production incentives, that percentage of the base load that doesn't produce GHGs is going to rise. So if we continue to install or operate gas or propane or fuel oil appliances in our homes, we're locked into 100% GHG emissions. If we move to electricity now, we're already making progress, and it gets better every year. And here's the challenge with replacing appliances now. Your normal gas or propane appliance is going to have a life of about 15 to 25 years. So if people are switching out their gas appliances today, they're going to continue to emit greenhouse gases long past the 2045 deadline that the state says we're going to have zero emissions. I think most of you understand that every methane gas appliance now has a more efficient electric replacement options. I'm going to run through quickly 4 good reasons to switch out. One is the emissions themselves, good for the planet. Secondly, and I want to dwell on this just a little bit, switching out is going to be good for your wallet. And there's going to be an upfront cost, a capital cost for new appliances, although we're going to talk about incentives in a little bit. But over the long term, Rewiring America estimates that 99% of the households in Maryland, more than 2 million, are going to save money on their energy bills if they did this. And of course, a lot of those are low and moderate income people. And so I was interested in that analysis. I wondered how they got there. And it's really all about efficiency. And I made this little graphic to just try to give sort of a layperson's view of efficiency and why this works. So let's assume that for electric resistance heat, and that's basically any coil that heats up. So your toaster oven, your baseboard heater, your space heater, your electric oven, any coil that heats up, let's say it has an efficiency of 1 to 1. 1 unit of energy in, 1 unit of heat out. methane, gas, propane, fuel oil burners are always less than 1 in efficiency because some of the heat goes up the chimney. And depending on the efficiency of the model you buy, the efficiency of a gas furnace or a boiler, someplace between 74% and about 98% now. The very most efficient ones that are on the market are right around 98% now. But you're already losing efficiency because some of that heat goes up the chimney. But here's the magic. Air source and ground source heat pumps are much more efficient, in the range of 2.8 to 3, and sometimes with ground heat pumps, as Phil knows, that efficiency can get up to 4. And these are some real numbers, and I just checked these again today. I want to walk through this quickly just to show you how you save money over long haul. As of the numbers that I checked today, the average residential gas price in Maryland is a little bit over 20 cents per 1,000 cubic feet of gas. That means that a million BTUs at an 85% efficiency will cost you $23.96, about 24 bucks. The average residential electric price in Maryland as of now is 14.21 cents per kilowatt hour. That means that a million BTUs of electric resistance heat are $41.63. So at this point, if it weren't for efficiency, it'd cost you more to heat with electric heat than it does with gas. But because of the efficiencies of heat pumps, if we run those numbers at an efficiency 3, which is not at all unreasonable, that million BTUs only costs you $13.88. Now, over the course of a winter in Maryland, heating a home uses someplace between 50 million and 100 million BTUs. And so if you run the numbers on 100 million BTUs in a heating system, the numerical difference between methane gas heating and heat pump heating is $1,000. And in my case, with my propane, it's a lot more than that. And those of you that burn fuel oil, it's a lot more than that too. So those are real numbers shared by the Energy Information Administration today, showing how switching out could save you $1,000 a year. And then people say, well, what about the long-term price of gas and electricity? Well, these are numbers from the Energy Information Administration showing projected prices out to 2050. The brown line is the projected price of gas, more or less flat. The blue line is the projected price of electricity, more or less flat. And these numbers were done before the recent Inflation Reduction Act, where it's passed with all its production tax credits, which is going to drive the cost of renewable energy down. So that that blue curve actually probably would be trending down over time. So moving on quickly. So we've talked about this in the past. Burning gas in your homes produces nitrogen oxides and particulate matter that there's a lot of medical evidence now that they show that it's really bad for your health. It can trigger asthma. And this meta-analysis that was done of 41 separate studies of air quality suggests that homes that have gas cooking have a 42% increase of risk of asthma. And that is particularly true for children. Children are more susceptible. And of course, older folks who have respiratory issues and some coming out of COVID run a greater risk of respiratory illnesses with burning gas in the homes. Such that the very conservative American Medical Association did a resolution in June saying that the AMA doctors should inform the public that the use of a gas stove increases air pollution and the risk of childhood asthma and severity, and that the AMA should actually play a role in advocating the transition to electric appliances. And we don't have to dwell on this, but we all know that gas blows up, and this has happened in Howard County recently. It's happened in Montgomery County recently. It happened in Evansville, Indiana last week, and some people died in Indiana. So this is kind of the nub of it. If you take the argument and you're interested to begin electrifying, get started. And my recommendation is that get this book, get the Rewiring America Handbook. It's free. You can get it online. There's the URL. And spend some time reading the Electrify Everything handbook. And then a home energy audit is really important. And they only cost $100. They're subsidized. You call your utility. I call BGE. I had a great contractor come and spend a couple hours in my house doing an audit. Wrote up a wonderful report. It cost me all of $100. Then, if you're serious about continuing, it's good to think about making your house electric ready. And the point is that not all houses have electric service that is ready for full electrification. And some of that may have to do with your electric service panel. The conventional wisdom on this is that you need at least 200 amps if you're going to do this. Some older homes don't have 200 amps, they have 100 amps. Some much older homes even have 60 amps. So you may have to heavy up your electric service panel, which is not inexpensive, and it takes a long time. And so if you're thinking about this, you need to get your electricity evaluated. And if you're thinking ahead, you're going to probably need a 220-volt plug-in, 55 amps at least, for an induction stove in your kitchen. And as I did when I decided to buy an electric car and get a charger in my garage, I had to have a new electric installation in my garage too. So make your home electric ready before you are ready to switch. And then know your appliances, know how old they are, know what their operating cost is, and make yourself a plan for what you want to do. What we've learned is that you need to be very picky about choosing a contractor. And this was actually Ruth Ellis's suggestion to me to say that when you're shopping around, tell them that you're interested in electrification and see whether they can take care of you, see whether they're experienced in this. Not all HVAC contractors are experienced, and not all HVAC contractors want to do this. A lot of them just want to sell you what they have off the shelf or sell you exactly what you have. So you need to find a contractor who's actually interested in helping you electrify. And then you need to be quite firm with them that what you want is an electric heat pump, and preferably one that does not have a gas backup. A lot of contractors are going to tell you that it's going to get too cold for your heat pump and you need to have a gas backup for those cold days. It's simply not true. So tell them that you don't want a gas backup, and then take full advantage of the incentive programs that are available. Here's a slide that I put together over the last couple of days that just talks about the new tax incentives in the new federal IRA bill. And these tax incentives actually don't kick in till income year 2023. So don't move ahead on actually buying this stuff in 2022, or you're not going to be able to take your full value for it. But in 2023, beginning on January 1st, the federal government is going to reimburse by means of a tax credit a lot of your expenditures for doing this. Home energy audit, I don't know how that works if it only costs you $100, but they're willing to give you a tax credit for up to 150. I assume you could just take your 100. But exterior doors, windows, central air, electric panel upgrades, you can get a tax credit for, and you can get up to $2,000 tax credit for an electric heat pump or a heat pump water heater. And then there's a different provision in the new bill that actually kicks in 2022 that will reimburse you by means of a tax credit 30% if you install geothermal, biomass, fuel cell, solar, wind, as well as battery storage over 2 kilowatt hours, so 2,000 kilowatt hours. So if you're thinking about this, probably wait until get your audit, get your electricity ready to go, and then starting on January 1st, the federal government's going to offer tax credits. What I want to do now is just duck out for a minute, so you don't need to listen to me for a moment. And Neil's going to just talk about heat pumps, a little bit of the work that he's doing. I think he's just got maybe 4 slides.
All right, thank you, Doug. Let me get this up. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I'll be talking about heat pumps and like sort of building off what Doug said about how they're efficient, how they're better, and how they're the future. But I think the best part to start off is like the name heat pump and how it's a huge misnomer and how it does not do the technology justice. So a heat pump transfers energy in the home and it just, well, it kind of pumps in heat, but it also makes it colder and hotter. And I'll get into how it's much more than just a pump for heat. But before I do that, I think it's important to talk about how gas-powered homes are heated. And I think the best way to visualize how a gas-powered home is heated is to try to think of like a Zippo lighter on top, underneath your home. So you have the lighter and you got the flame and then you got your home and the flame is heating up your home, but there's a ton of wasted energy going everywhere and it's super inefficient. And there's also all that stuff that comes out from burning the lighter. So that's a really simplified definition, and that's what, and then on the left you'll see how it actually is done. So you burning, let's just say gas, I'm sorry, I mean it's like 30 minutes ago. So burning gas generates heat, then the heat passes through a heat exchanger, then that air from the ductwork is blown over the heat exchanger and then through the home. Now this system is wasteful, as you're talking about. It's really, really inefficient. I talked about 74 to 97% of the gas is just wasted. It's dangerous. We talked about gas leaks and explosions, but also about carbon monoxide leaks. Like my home is gas powered and we have carbon monoxide detectors everywhere because, I mean, tons of homes in our area have had carbon monoxide leaks from their gas furnaces that can be deadly. And they're old. Furnaces were invented in 1919. There have been very few innovations since. And the same general idea of just burning something and then sending the heat generated from burning that all throughout the home, that stayed the same. So how do electric heat pumps work? So heat pumps work as both a heater and a cooler. So the heating mode, it absorbs heat energy from the outside air and it sends it inside the home, and the cooling absorbs heat energy from the home and sends it to the outside air. So it transfers energy rather than generating new heat pumps. So it's virtually carbon, and so it's done with electricity as opposed to gas or anything like that. So you're not creating any pollutants and you're not generating any carbon emissions because all you're doing is just transferring what's around you to make it more efficient and to make it more, and just make it work for you. So it's reliable. It's been tested all throughout the world in a bunch of different climates and areas. Even in Maine, it works in the dead of the winter. Doug was telling me about this actually. There was a study done with 10 homes all throughout Maine, and they Maine government gave these homes heat pumps, and at the end, after the winter, they brought these homeowners together and they said, how did the heat pump work for you? And 7 out of the 10 said it worked well. There was literally no issue. There was nothing wrong with it. The other, they gave minor complaints or feedback on how they'd like it to be improved. But in Maryland, we have much nicer winters, and it'll work better in Maryland with literally no issues. Like my neighbor has a heat pump and he says it works fine and it works well for him. So then comparing the two between a furnace and a heat pump, furnaces have gas leaks, heat pumps do not. Furnaces are getting more expensive with the war and the situation in Russia. Gas is becoming more expensive in the country and it does not seem like it's going to be going down for much for a long time. Furnaces have a high carbon output. We discussed that, how burning CO2 and methane, which is 86 times more powerful than carbon dioxide and can stay in the air for a long time, and how furnaces are a big commitment. So my house was built in 2009 and it was built with a furnace, and the furnace has just been running for the last, 13 years. And I mean, you can't really afford to just replace it out of the blue, so we just have to wait for the furnace to live its life, which can be, be another decade where we're producing carbon emissions until we can transfer out to a heat pump. And furnaces are very high maintenance. For my home personally, we have to have BG&E come in like every 6-7 months to make sure the furnace is working well and to refill propane and things like that. Whereas heat pumps are very low maintenance. You just put it in, runs on the power grid, low cost maintenance, higher cost up front, but with that new bill that's coming in, all these tax credits is being lowered because the government wants to push all of these more eco-friendly and safe options towards the public. And yeah, it's the future and it's a necessary thing that we can all benefit from. Any questions? And hold on, let's just see if I can. Okay. Oh, okay. All right, no questions. Perfect.
Well, we have actually some comments on heat pumps in the chat.
Right.
Somebody asked about freon refrigerant leaks from heat pumps. Oh, that was Hans.
So, I'm not too versed in that, but I'm sure that it could be an issue. But refrigerant leaks are in every single cooling system. But heat pumps, as long as you maintain them and you treat them right, they're built to last. They're built to be reliable, and it's not as big of an issue as, let's say, a carbon monoxide leak from a furnace or anything like that. But I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I'm not very versed in this. I made this presentation 45 minutes ago. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Well, a heat pump provides both air conditioning, it provides cooling.
Correct.
You know, my old air conditioner had a leak, but it was 30 years old eventually.
Mhm.
I mean, I replaced it with a heat pump. There are a couple of other comments about homes. Kathy lives in a housing cooperative which is all electric, and but she got heat pumps 2.5 years ago. Maybe we could, let's see, we had a question about heat pump water heaters, but that's back to Doug's presentation. So maybe we can do the rest of these questions after Doug.
Right. Okay. Back to you, Doug.
Great. So this is about policy and politics, and we're most of the way through the presentation, but this is actually an equally important part of it. So if I can get my screen to change here. There we go. So the idea of creating laws, creating new ordinances, local ordinances and state laws to force electrification of new buildings is actually really moving around the country rapidly right now. And I just pulled out a few of the places that within the last 2 years have created new ordinances and laws to try to force particularly new buildings off of gas and propane and fuel oil into electricity. And you can read them there. I don't need to read them to you. We're going to talk about DC in just a little bit, but now there's more than 80 around the country, and it's just happening literally every week. And I like this quote from the Urban Land Institute representative: if cities are serious about their climate goals, electric is inevitable. So one of the things that we hear a lot is that, well, from a matter of policy, if we did this, it would incur more costs. And this cost stuff is complicated, but I guess I would just say in very short, it would appear from some very reliable sources, including builders, that the costs of an all-electric building are roughly the same, depending on what kind of building it is, whether it's a single-family home or whether it's a townhouse or whether it's a commercial building and how large. Initial costs are just about the same. And some of that is because you don't have to install a gas system. And so you get the savings from not having to install a gas system. You just have electricity, which you're going to have there anyway. And again, the Urban Land Institute basically says that if owners and developers are not prepared to electrify, they're going to risk the premature obsolescence of their buildings. It's also good for environmental justice because new buildings that are built with electricity are going to save money over time, as we've talked about. And tenants who are in those new buildings, by and large, tenants end up paying the rent, and in many cases, the utilities. One way or the other, they're going to pay for the increases in the fuel costs that are going to be avoided if the buildings are electrified. And then the third paragraph here is an argument about sunk costs. Basically, the argument is that the gas system has all this infrastructure, pipes underground. They need to be repaired. There are capital costs in repairing and replacing pipes. And also, the gas industry says that the future of the gas industry is to move toward hydrogen and move toward biogas, both of which require an upgraded pipe system. The pipe system that pipes methane gas, fossil methane gas, is not sufficient. So there are going to be a lot of capital costs incurred with a pipe system, and those costs are going to be stranded as more and more people get off the gas system. Low and moderate income people who are still paying for gas are going to be paying a higher and higher percentage of those stranded costs. And this is some modeling that was done by the firm that was hired by the Maryland Climate Commission. And they basically showed two scenarios. One would be high electrification with a structured gas transition, and the other with an unstructured gas transition. There's a little bit of difference in the curves, but look at what those curves do between now and 2045. In both cases, this modeling shows that the delivery costs of gas are going to rise precipitously between now and 2045. And if you're still on the gas system and you're going to be paying a larger and larger share of those stranded costs, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And finally, in this sector, the electrification is going to be good for jobs. And Paul, I heard you the last time you heard this presentation. If you're still there, I did buy the book. I read all about it. I learned a lot more about climate jobs. But the fact is that as we electrify new buildings and then work on retrofits, there's going to be a lot more jobs created because of that. So then just two things before we get to Howard County. I was involved over the last few months in creating two new laws in DC. One of the laws in DC is about all new commercial, institutional, and government buildings, requiring those buildings to be what's called net zero energy. And net zero energy is beyond electrification by a long shot. It includes electrification. In fact, the statutory language in DC says that no fuel combustion whatsoever in a new building is allowed for thermal energy. So that basically means no fuel, no methane, no propane, no fuel oil for heat, for hot water, or for cooking. Anything that provides thermal energy is now prohibited for new buildings in DC. Beyond that, net zero energy means that a commercial building or an institutional building is going to have to either generate on site or buy renewable energy to the degree of annual use. And so every new building is basically going to be a closed ecosystem on energy, using its own renewable energy in the District of Columbia. That's the new law. And then a second new law that was passed at the same time, and both of these actually were unanimous in the DC Council. A second new law prohibits the DC government from buying any new methane gas boilers or furnaces in government buildings, or buying any new gas cars or light trucks. So DC has really set the bar for our region now with net zero energy and no replacement of methane or gas vehicles. And in Montgomery County, there is legislation pending for all electric codes for new buildings and substantially renovated buildings, houses and commercial buildings, institutional buildings, government buildings, with a couple of exceptions. And we're looking toward a likely vote in November. This is what the legislation is called and what it does. They're referring to it as Bill 1322, requires the county executive to issue all electric building standards for new construction, major renovations and additions by January 1st of 24, with some limited exceptions. And so CCAN and others have formed a coalition that is working hard for the passage of this bill. We expect, as I said, to have a vote in November. And on the Montgomery County Council, there's 9 members. We need to get 5 of them to vote for this policy. We're confident that we're going to. It's a strong coalition. We're working together very well. We had a coalition strategy meeting on Monday, just a couple of days ago, and have real hopes that this is going to happen in Montgomery County soon. So, last slide. What's the future for Howard? So, point 1, the update to the county climate action plan is now underway, and I don't know whether the process of updating the climate action plan is going to involve electrification. I've done my best to talk to Josh Feldmark and others about that, but really don't have a clue yet of whether the update is going to include this. I think as an advocacy point, I think that all of us ought to be pushing the government to make sure that when that climate update is promulgated, that it actually includes this kind of electrification for all the reasons that I've talked about tonight. Secondly, back in November, Councilwoman Liz Walsh put forward an amendment during a debate about building codes that would have electrified homes, would have created a new law that said all new homes in the district, in the Howard County, have to be electrified. She didn't get a second. Notwithstanding Ruth Alice and Liz's great testimony about why that was important, she couldn't get a second on the council. But during the debate, 3 of the 4 remaining council members expressed interest in the idea and said they didn't want to do it as an amendment. They wanted to do it as a full bill that could have hearings and discussion. So here we are. There's no full bill yet. Neither Councilwoman Walsh nor anyone else has actually introduced a full bill. But because of Councilwoman Rigby, this is going to be a topic of discussion in the September monthly meeting. Not the legislative meeting where they deal with legislation, but what they call the administrative meeting. It's going to be on the agenda to talk about. And Ruth Alice and Liz and several of you here and I are taking the initial steps to organize a coalition, much like we have in Montgomery County, to advocate for a bill similar to what Montgomery County is doing, or possibly a net zero energy bill like they did in DC, which goes beyond electrification. And so I want everybody on the call to be aware of that we're pushing forward to those kinds of efforts, and we would love to have you as part of the team. So thanks for indulging me. I know it was a long presentation. Happy to take questions if you're interested in more information. There's our contact stuff, and I like this quote from Bob Marietta: if we all do a little, we can get a lot done. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. The chat has been very busy, and we will share all the resources available. People have been asking questions and been answered in the chat. If you would like to ask a question, maybe you could take down your slide so we can see each other. If you could raise your virtual hand. Okay, Bonnie and Laura, I see first.
Great, thanks, Ruth Ann. Ruth Alice, I have actually 2 questions. Hopefully they'll be relatively quick. I have a concern about the transfer and equity given supply chain issues. How do we decide who should be changing their systems first? My fear is that people of means will be able to, take advantage of these tax credits and switch over their houses more quickly than poor people will, and soak up all that supply. Does it make more sense for people with big houses to be switching first because they have big houses that are using a lot of energy, or working with poor people to get them switched over because of the health issues and things like that? So that's question 1. And the second question is about what's going to happen with all the old heat pumps and water heaters, and is there something set up where those materials and things are going to be recycled, reclaimed, reused for other purposes rather than just making more trash. Does anybody know anything about either?
Well, can I respond to the last one first? We are not recommending that people replace newer gas furnaces. We're recommending that at the end of life, which is 15 to 20 years, that you consider replacing a gas furnace or a gas water heater. And the I can't speak, the recycling part, I know you're concerned about that, and it would be great if you and others would research what happens now to those furnaces, but it would be the same thing at their end of life when people choose a replacement. The statewide groups are, some of the national and state legislation gives priority to low income, and the Maryland Climate Partners groups are very much pushing to have replacements targeted in Maryland to the low and moderate income first. And we all have to be aware of how the federal money coming down is and state money that's being allocated for this is used. The legislation that Doug is talking about has to do with new buildings, but not existing buildings. And Brooke, I see your hand, and I know you had a question about apartments. I can answer part of that, and then maybe you can see if that's it, or you can ask. But this past session, the legislature passed a bill saying that existing large buildings over 35,000 square feet would have to meet new building performance standards, which would mean that gradually they would need to move toward net zero. And again, this isn't a requirement that they replace something that's relatively new and operating well now, but that as the end of life comes. So we're talking about this transition not being immediate or this year or even in 5 years, but that we start in a process of looking toward, and this is true for larger buildings, and Montgomery County has already passed a building performance standard law. So they will be doing this with their large buildings too.
Is there any way to even for tenants to check compliance? Like I can think of a perfect example recently where I know that our water heater in our building was replaced relatively recently, and I have no idea what they replaced it with.
Yeah, these laws are not, the law that passed in Maryland, they haven't written the regulations for it. They just passed it in April. The regulations will take a year to 18 months to write. So these things will be going into effect over a period of time.
Okay. And then the other question I had, because I'm actually thinking more along the lines of my mother's house, there was a mention of how heat pumps for water tanks, like heating the water tanks, was more efficient compared to like tankless water heaters, which not only they do the flash heating thing as they go through the pipes. Is there any preference in terms of efficiency between those two options?
Yeah, I think I can take that. We have a tankless gas or propane actually water heater, and love it. It's been great. But the fact is, when we use it, it burns gas, propane, and creates greenhouse gas emissions. And I don't think that the technology has advanced yet to have a instantaneous electric water heater. I don't think that exists yet, but there are heat pump water heaters that have tanks that only use electricity. So when you use them, they don't create any greenhouse gases.
Laura?
Yes, thank you. This is a great presentation. It's very inspiring to hear about what's going on in DC and Montgomery County and now Howard County. Some of us in attendance don't live in Howard County. We live in Prince George's County. I know Kathy and I think James, and I know Barbara lives in Virginia. But my question is, I'm curious, maybe it's too early in the summer to say, is CCAN planning to launch a statewide campaign? And do you all know anything about that? Again, going back to the Maryland General Assembly, and is CCAN organizing like sort of canned presentations, to go around and help people understand what Doug was explaining, but, in a more simplified way, but to focus on a policy at the Maryland state level?
Yeah,
And I don't know,
so
Neil question, because he was working there all summer, or Doug question?
I'll take it. So what happened at the General Assembly was that the provision that would have created statewide all electric codes got pulled out. And so CCAN decided that it would use a technique that it's used before to try to really focus on counties, to try to get county level action, which is good in its own right, but also then creates momentum for state level action. What happened at the General Assembly was that they deferred it to pending the results of a study, which are going to be available in late 2023. The earliest that the General Assembly can really take this up then would be in the session starting early in 2024. So probably nothing can happen next year. It's going to be 2 years before the state can take it on. What CCAN decided to do was to, for staffing reasons, largely focus on Montgomery County, Howard County, and Frederick County to begin. And then depending on our level of success and whether we can raise money and how we're doing, take it out to other counties in Maryland too. Having said that, and also in Virginia, for those whoever's from Virginia, I was talking to our Virginia director yesterday about whether we could begin to do this in Virginia, and there's some Dillon rule issues in Virginia, but we think that we probably can start in Virginia as well. Having said that, though, I'm quite happy, or my colleagues are quite happy to make presentations in Prince George's or Baltimore County or Baltimore City or other places around the state to talk about electrification in general. We've just identified those three counties as the priorities.
But it's important to know that there won't be a statewide campaign this year because of this strategy to focus on the counties first. So that's really important and good information to know. So thank you.
Well, because
Yes,
it's the electrification study that's going to take 18 months at the General Assembly.
right,
So,
right.
Yeah, it's not our choice. It's their choice that we can't do anything until the electrification study is finished in 18 months.
Right, but just for those of us that kind of wait every fall for CCAN to announce their statewide campaign, it's not going to be electrification. It'll be on some other bill. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
But the climate partners, which involve CCAN, the Sierra Club, League of Conservation Voters, and many groups, many people here have been tracking what the climate partners are doing. They are looking at climate provisions, and there will be recommendations, one of which may involve having a look at the gas distribution issue, which is totally related to electrification, and is one of the reasons that the legislature deferred. We have with us Joelle Novi from Interfaith Power and Light, and she's in her group has been working with others in DC on studying methane monitoring, which is a way of getting congregations involved in the issue of gas leaks and the potential harms of gas in buildings. So did you want to say just a few words about that, Joelle?
Yeah, we're just getting started in Maryland, but for over a year in DC, worked with partners, Washington Interfaith Network, the DC Sierra Club, and others to support congregations in walking around their own neighborhoods and testing for gas leaks with a gas leak detector, and documented 389 gas leaks, 14 or 15 of which were quite serious, just in the district, in every neighborhood, like in every ward of the DC area. So that personal experience gave people a really real confidence in being able to speak to their legislators about how this was endangering their communities. And so we are getting organized with some of the WIN partners in the other counties in Maryland, including PATH and AIM, to begin the process of testing for, sorry, my kids are making a lot of noise in the background. I hope you can't hear them. To begin, several years of work, inviting folks to become aware of the fact that they are burning fossil fuels in their own kitchens. A lot of people are not aware that we are still, burning fossil fuels in our own kitchens, and measuring. We're gonna keep doing that. Those gas leak detecting outings where we measure gas leaks outdoors, but we are also going to start using a nitrogen detector, or nitrogen oxide detector to measure pollution indoors in people's own kitchens if they want. So that hasn't started formally, but we bought the equipment, and we're thinking of all of this work, big picture, as a process of turning away from burning. That we have to move away from any kind of combustion energy. Shell is asking a good question, which is that at some point, DC had committed to billions of dollars of gas infrastructure replacement, and we were trying to argue in the council that we needed to just accept the fact that the future was not fossil fuels, and we needed to move away from gas. Doug, do you know what ever happened with that tentative plan?
Yeah, so the gas utility, Washington Gas, has aspirations to have a 40-year plan to repair and upgrade its pipe system. And it has to go to the DC Public Service Commission to get permission to do that. And so what's happened is that they went to the DC PSC, and the DC PSC approved a very limited amount of repair and replacement in the first tranche. And then they went back for a second tranche, and they tried again, and the PSC approved another limited repair and replacement program. This year, by the end of the year, they're going to go back for tranche 3, and we have every reason to believe that the PSC at the end of the day is going to approve another limited replacement program. There's never been anything more than an aspiration to spend billions of dollars. Whatever they do has got to be approved by the PSC, and the PSC is approving it little by little, certainly the big repairs, but not wholesale.
Yeah, so much of this work is the work that communities and faith communities in particular can lead, which is about changing the culture and changing the language and changing the framework that people have. So in DC, people kept talking about gas leaks as like discrete problems that could be patched and repaired one at a time. And we were trying to move away from that and saying, no, it's a verb. Gas leaks anywhere gas is, any pipeline, any place that gas is being brought up out of the ground, is being transferred, is coming into your home, it leaks. Hashtag gas leaks, right? And once we really accept that anywhere we're using gas, it's leaking, we can start to really reckon with what we need to do to transition off. Likewise, I don't know if this was discussed earlier, but we have just made a complete commitment not to use the word natural in connection with this fossil fuel anymore, because that word is misleading people, and it gives positive connotations to something that's really destructive and dangerous. And so we are just consistently saying methane gas, and I think that by itself will help to move the culture. And I would welcome everyone, sharing my pledge to move away from the old terminology, because I think it's not helping. Thank you.
Thank you. We need the same process in Maryland to get the PSC to regulate what the gas industry wants to do in terms of replacement of pipes. It's going to be a long haul, but it's one of the things on the agenda for the climate partners in Maryland also. And I just wanted to hear what you had to say, Joelle, to point out that many of the congregations in the Oakland Mills Interfaith Center are associated with PATH, and many people throughout Howard County may be part of congregations that will be working on this issue.
Hey, Ruth, Alice, if I could just bounce in for a second, there's to reinforce what Joelle just said, there's a lot of data nationally that shows that across the political spectrum, people have accepted that methane gas is really bad, or methane is bad. They may not even be sure what methane is, but they think it's bad. And so to the degree that we can always say methane gas, we can actually get a sympathetic ear across the political spectrum. People think that natural gas is natural, therefore it's good, therefore it's green, and the industry's tried to do that. Even fracked gas is not, it turns out not to be a very good thing to say, because particularly on the right side of the political spectrum, people think that fracked gas is good, but everybody hates methane. So fully endorse what Joelle just said.
I'm looking at the chat to see what other questions there are. Bonnie, you asked, when does the 18-month clock start? I think Doug responded to that in terms of the study, that it's due December.
I did, but I wasn't sure. I think it's December 2023.
Right.
is,
So
yeah.
I don't know what that means. I guess we'll be gearing up for legislation anyway. That was my question, is if we're not going to have the results till December of 2023, is that going to be too late to introduce statewide legislation in that session, right?
No.
Is it going to be, now we have to wait till 2024 because the report's not coming out till 2023, December?
Well, the session's the first 3 months of 2024, so we'll surely be preparing legislation at the end of 2023 for the consideration of the 2024 session.
I mean, either all electric or at least electric ready. They pulled out that part too. So any new building doesn't have to be electric ready, to have the wires ready to go for EV charging or heat pumps, or upgraded panels. So at least we probably would have that ready to go while we wait for the study, if not all electric. Is that a true statement?
Yes, and there's a lot of other provisions and things that we're following. The building performance standards for existing buildings are in process, and the climate partners groups have people on the work groups that will be working with the state to write those requirements. And the same thing is going on in Montgomery County, and hopefully they'll be following Montgomery County's lead, since it's sort of the lead progressive county for the state. But Paul has a question.
Sure. Doug and Neil, thanks for a great presentation. Most of what you said, of course, had to do with buildings, both commercial and particularly individual homes. And you only touched on vehicles. Maybe we could have another entire discussion on vehicles, and maybe it's unfair to bring it up, but I will at this particular point, because vehicles have a shorter end of life than some of our major home heating and cooling operations, And it's important that you discussed first our choices as individual consumers, and then the policy questions for the community, the county, the state, the nation. And I think the only question that came up on vehicles is that they're pretty expensive at this point until the prices are coming down. But I think there's also the policy issue to make recharging, as you mentioned, Doug, recharging easier. I don't have a garage. A lot of us don't have a garage. We're not encouraged to plug in our electric vehicles. And we still have institutions in our community, schools, shopping centers, post offices that could fill that function of recharging. And that right now there's a move, and it's legislation, and I believe it is a presidential statement on directive on getting X number, I can't remember, of postal vehicles to be electric. I'm rounding up to a question there at this particular point. I read recently, actually it wasn't recently, it was fairly recently, that in Norway, which produces oil, by the way, you will not be able to buy a combustion engine private vehicle, a new one in the country, in 3 years, 2025. You're not going to be able to buy a vehicle that's an internal combustion engine. And I want to slash my wrists. Now, trucks are still going on in terms of that stuff. But, you know, some people, some institutions, some countries are so far ahead. And by the way, Norway has about as many people as Maryland does. In any case, I'm just asking you and asking the group, maybe we should have a special discussion on electric vehicles as a separate issue. What do you think, Doug? What do you think, Neil?
Go ahead, Neil.
So I agree that it's important to have a talk about electric vehicles, but it's also really important to emphasize that it takes a lot of, mining cobalt and really carbon strenuous activities to build an electric car. So it's not always, and it's not something environmentally friendly to just say, okay, I want an electric car now, and drop your already perfectly functioning combustion engine car and then just get an electric one. You're just being wasteful at that point. And it's something that really needs to be educated with people, to people, that you can't just get an electric car because you want to be more environmentally friendly. And then I was reading this really interesting article about how, once people get something like an electric car or they get solar panels, they start doing more carbon negative actions because they think, oh, I have an electric car, I can leave the lights on longer, I can throw this away instead of recycling. And that's also something that we really need to be pushing to people and saying that just because you are doing some carbon friendly things does not mean you can start being a horrible person for the environment and other aspects of your life. But yeah, up to you, Doug.
Paul, I'd make two comments. One is if you think back to one of those pie charts I had early in the presentation, it was something like 53 or 57% of the greenhouse gas emissions in Maryland are transportation related. So yes, I mean, absolutely, we've got to have that discussion. And the other point is, just from a policy point of view, I pointed out that in the district, they just prohibited the purchase of gas cars. And there's no reason that Howard County couldn't do that too, or anybody else.
But we need to strengthen transportation alternatives, and there's very strong work groups working with the overall climate partners that are looking at a whole range of transportation alternatives for Maryland, which do not all involve cars. The current Maryland administration has been very car friendly and wanted Lexus lanes with toll roads to be built. And the climate groups have been opposing the extension of roads and especially toll roads and looking at alternative methods of transportation, which have been severely underfunded for years. So That's a very complex topic, and there are many good people that could speak to us on that. And you're right, there's a lot of issues there, but that's for another evening. It's a good topic. I think we're winding down. Do we have any more questions? We'll put all of the questions in the chat and all of the resources in an email that we'll send out to everyone that's registered. Any final comments or questions from people? And then Doug, would you like to sum it all up?
Yeah, well, I would just like to really encourage people to keep an eye out for participating in a coalition of to try to get some legislation through the Howard County Council. I know that traditionally we've focused more on state and less on county policy, but I think that it's entirely doable, and I think we're moving in that direction. And sometime soon we're going to be rolling out techniques like we're doing in Montgomery County. We've got a very complex campaign plan in Montgomery County that involves petitions and emails and telephone calls and texts and rallies and yard signs and street signs, and some version of that is probably going to happen in Howard County, and I would really urge all of you and your friends to be part of it. And if you have places where a speaker could come and try to rally folks, please let me or Ruth Alice or Liz or anybody from HOCO Climate Action know about opportunities to go try to rally people. But thanks for the opportunity very much.
Oh, and a reminder of the Family Fun Night at Oakland Mills. Everyone is invited, stuff for adults and young people and children, on Saturday, September 27th. And we are having a post.
Sorry, just want to say August 27th.
August 27th, excuse me, because I was thinking ahead. August 27th, and then we are having a second Zoom on electrification to follow up on themes raised here and to answer questions and invite people that that didn't make it here, but you all are welcome back again. We'll have something different on September 7th. So we'll send you the link for registering for that. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, one other thing, a student group in Howard County, the Sunrise Movement students, are planning to work with us on this electrification project, and also have been inspired by the Climate Partners Initiative in Prince George's County to get their county school board to declare a climate emergency and to move to green the schools, including electrification. So the students will be with us at OMI in Oakland Mills on August 27th, Saturday, August 27th, and you can meet them there. And thank you all. Thank you all.
Well, thank you.